Yo, what's up YouTube? This is your boy T.I. here, and today I am going to be talking about one of these trucking companies that doesn't exist anymore, called Dick Simon Trucking. And Dick Simon Trucking was like one of the largest refrigerated trucking companies in the United States, and obviously Dick Simon was based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Of course, Dick Simon was referred to by the skunks on the side that said Sweet Simon, but everyone called him Stinky Simon because, you know, obviously that company, you know, a lot of the employees and the management there was really poor. Obviously, you know, Dick Simon himself, the CEO and owner, who started the whole operation, thought it would be really funny to have a skunk on the side of his truck. Obviously, you know, that to me made it funny and made it even stinky, so everyone called him Stinky Simon. Obviously his management was like really poor back in the day, and one of his trucking company grew from like the 80s, like 1980, to all the way into the early 2000s. And then finally in 2000, somewhere in like 2002, Dick Simon went bankrupt due to the fact that there was a lawsuit against this one driver that was like a really like psychopathic convict that they let drive one of their trucks. Of course, he went through their school, you know, their training school that they have on their base, and of course he went through their school. He was really a good student that passed their background check, everything, and of course he referred to himself as God's messenger, which is sounds kind of crazy. And he was taking messages from God. Of course, he had a bad history of background of like him being psychopathic. He was in and out of prison multiple times, and he even was committed to like an insane asylum somewhere in like Atascadero State Hospital in California. Of course, after that he was released once the doctor thought he wasn't a danger to himself or others. So then he decided to apply for Dick Simon Trucking and start his career in the long haul trucking industry. So of course one day he picked up a load of powdered milk to haul to the Sioux Falls Indian Reservation somewhere in the Midwest. Of course, he picked it up in Lathrop, California, and was headed to the Sioux Falls Indian Reservation. And then he was here. Of course, he was mad at the dispatcher because his truck's camera his truck's heater would not work. Sorry, I'm just thinking about the camera. And of course, the heater in his truck wouldn't work, and he was really cold all night. And of course, he was also mad at the female dispatchers, and then his wife and kids, and then people cutting him off on the freeway. They decided, well, I'll just I'll just pull off in Sacramento and go all the way and ram my big rig into the Capitol. Well, anyways, what he did is he actually rammed it full force into the Capitol, this California State Capitol building, full force, like 46 miles per hour, almost the freeway speed for a big rig. And then it completely set the whole building on fire, and it destroyed half the Capitol building and cost over $1 million to repair the whole damages. And then, of course, Dick Simon got sued by the state. And of course, part of the reason why he probably rammed it in is because he was probably hearing voices from other, like, delusional or hallucinations and delusions, And of course, part of the reason was maybe he was mad at the state because they committed him to an insane asylum. And, you know, of course, the state had to because he was a crazy one. And of course, him, you know, he flunked, well, back to him, back after he got out of the Simon trucking school, he basically went to, he went out with a trainer, and his trainer said he was too crazy and not really cooperative, that his trainer told management several times to fire him, and they refused to fire him. And then finally he said, "Can you please fire this person? He is really mean." Well, they fired him. They fired that jackass because he was just a jackass. That's all he was. And so they basically, all they did was, you know, that guy was not a good candidate for Dick Simon Trucking. He was not a safe trucker. Of course, he decided that it was okay to ram his big rig into the Capitol building, and who knows, he didn't really kill or injure anyone in the notes that I read or in the notes that I've heard. Well, anyways, he basically rammed at full force into the Capitol building at full throttle, that it set his truck on fire, and his truck completely exploded, went up in flames, and completely burned all the way to the ground, to where the truck was history, and so was part of the Capitol building, which they had to, well, they had to like rebuild it, but you know, so was his life, because he took his life and he took his truck, and he was really mad at himself, or all his family members and the dispatchers at Dick Simon. And then shortly after that, there was a lawsuit that actually cost the company a lot of money to rebuild all their trucks, and finally in like 2001 the company basically, or 2002, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and then they merged with Swift, which, you know, the owner of Swift, one of the Swift kids, you know, owner Jerry Moyse, which is, well, one of his kids married one of the daughters of one of the Simon kids. Well, anyways, the Simon kids married, I guess, his daughter or son, I can't remember which, and then Jerry tried buying Simon so many times, multiple times he tried to buy Simon, and he couldn't get through to them, and then finally, when they went bankrupt, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and then all the assets were sold to Central Refrigerated, which is part of Swift today. And of course, you can kind of tell on some of the trucks how, you know, the red stripes are actually still in visibility today. That was part of Dick Simon. Now it's part of Central Refrigerated. And of course, Dick Simon, back in the day, there were always constantly ads in the Salt Lake City newspaper for all kinds of like employees, like every single day. Every single day there were ads regarding like management and janitorial jobs, and maybe even mechanic jobs, and even driving position jobs, because a lot of their drivers obviously quit because the company was not they found out it was not a good company to work for, so everyone quit, and the management was basically messed up, everything. So finally they said, well, you know, we're just gonna shut down and maybe merge with Central, because, you know, company's losing money. So finally one day they laid off a bunch of their employees, like 1,000 of them, including all their drivers, got laid off too, of course. And then one other day they closed and they merged with Central Refrigerated. All the assets were sold off to them, and even some of the drivers that used to work for Simon still work for Central Refrigerated today. And you know, the terminal in West Valley City over by Salt Lake, obviously, you know, is still in visibility, but there's no Dick Simon sign anymore. Instead it says Central Refrigerated, and there's, you know, that is kind of sad how you don't see a skunk on the sign anymore, which, you know, in 2002 this name still remained till like sometime in December, and then after December they changed the name over to Central Refrigerated. And Central Refrigerated is basically part of Swift. And, you know, obviously one of the kids of Dick Simon, Kelly Simon, he owns his own trucking company, but it's not as big as Dick Simon, but it's a fairly good sized company to work for. And then there's also another Simon trucking company in Salt Lake City, but it still has the skunk on the side, but it as a logo, but you know, the skunk is running instead of holding a flag saying Sweet Simon. And of course, you know, that skunk, you know, is not the same as the skunk you used to see way back in the day. And I'm referring to, you know, on the highway, like the Dick Simon skunk basically was a really good thing to look at for all the little kids out there. You know, they got a kick out of that skunk on the trucks, you know. And you know, basically Dick Simon, you know, he merged with Central Refrigerated, and good old Dickie just, you know, he filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and the whole company's merged with Dick Simon. So, I mean, with Central Refrigerated. Sorry, my bad. So, basically, Central Refrigerated bought them out, basically. So did Swift. And, you know, that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about. The rest is kind of a long story, but to make it kind of short, I'm going to say that, you know, I know a lot about trucking companies like Dick Simon because, you know, obviously my dad, a long time ago, went to apply for them but never got the job as a driver. And then I believe one of my friends, he drove for them a long time ago, but now he no longer drives for them. And back in the day, they were based out of Salt Lake City, and they had like over 1,000 trucks and trailers. And, you know, their management was like really horrible, like poor. So they decided, you know, a lot of people decided to quit that company because it was not the company for them. So that's all I got about the companies. I'm really smart when it comes to trucking companies, so anyone have any suggestions about reviews of any other bad companies, like, or want to hit me up a comment about Dick Simon, like how bad it was back in the days? Any other truckers who used to work for Dick Simon want to hit me up about it? I don't care if it's a hater comment or a liking comment. I don't even care what it is. Just hit me up. I don't care what it is. So that's all for today, and see you later, YouTube. Good night. Bye.